Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we're here for a poetry review. Dalton, what are we reviewing this time?
We are reviewing a poem that we've both read before. This is a poem, for some reason, I've always enjoyed. This is Richard Cory by E.A. Robinson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taught in a lot of classes, too, so hopefully this helps some people out along the way. That's kind of our goal.
Yeah, I've got a story about it in a class that's a psychology class. So we'll get there afterwards.
Okay.
We're going to start with two read-throughs of the poem, then 3 good things, 3 bad things, the best line, a literary analysis. Wow, I just slurred that all out. Rating and recommendation based on the text by Edwin Arlington Robinson. You want to go first or second?
Sure, I'll go first. Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperatively slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head.
Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean, favored, and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked, and waited for the light, and went without meat, and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head.
Look at that. I usually don't care for poems that have, campy little rhyme schemes and everything, but this is good to me.
I think that it lulls you to sleep with this one, doesn't it?
Okay.
Do you have 3 good things for this?
I do. First, the ending of this will always be memorable from the very first time you read it. You will not forget this poem. Number 2, this is real enough to pierce the veil of your comfort zone. You don't expect it, but it's very real to you. And 3, this is easy, this is quick, and anyone can sit down and enjoy this. Very approachable.
Number 1 on my 3 good things, this poem is a lot like the rope-a-dope. Do you know what the rope-a-dope was?
The rope-a-dope, yes.
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman. George Foreman was known as a big slugger. Mm-hmm. No one had ever lasted in the ring with George Foreman.
Yep.
So Muhammad Ali's tactic was, this guy knocks everyone out, knocks them out fast, because he's got big, heavy fists. I'm going to let him go to town. Mm-hmm. So Muhammad Ali just went against the ropes and took everything Foreman had, everything Foreman had, until Foreman punched himself out. Basically letting him think that everything was going great until it wasn't.
Nice.
This is a rope-a-dope.
Okay.
Let you believe that everything is going great. It's just a nice, pretty poem until all of a sudden someone puts a bullet through their head.
And that's my monthly sports analogy. Thank you.
2, really impressive tempo and rhythm to this poem, mm-hmm. Even with a rhyme that is harder to pull off than I think is often granted credit for.
Okay.
And 3, again, our list's overlapping. You read or hear this poem once, and you will always remember it. You might not remember the name of it. You might not remember who wrote it, because no one ever remembers who wrote it. You might not remember the rhyme scheme or what's going on in the poem, but you remember that feeling.
It's a good poem in that sense, for sure.
3 bad things.
3 bad things. You aren't going to find a day-changing, a week-changing, any kind of huge quote to pull from this. It's very simple. This is dark, and therefore can be uncomfortable for some people. And 3rd and finally, there's not a whole lot to dig through on this one here. I think you're going to disagree with me there, but it seems pretty cut and dry to me. But we'll get into that.
So, 1, on 3 bad things, past the core conceit, there's not a lot of complexity here, is there?
Fair.
2, you're only going to remember this poem for one reason.
Okay.
I think that detracts from the greatness.
Okay.
If you're remembering it for one thing. And 3, though there is cutesy language, I don't like the cutesy language.
Okay.
Gentleman from sole to crown. right?
Okay.
You're switching that up and you're putting that in there for the rhyme scheme, aren't you?
All right. All
Do
right.
you have a best line?
Best line's kind of hard to come by here. Naturally, I'm going to say those last two lines in Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home, put a bullet through his head. That's going to be what sticks with you. But my opinion here, in fine, we thought he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. I think that's your first turn there, and that's what first brings you back to life in this.
Yeah, so I think that mine were those final two lines of the third stanza. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. Because without that, I think it is harder to identify with the speaker here.
Okay.
So that final turn in the rope-a-dope might not knock us out.
Okay.
Right?
All right, I can agree with you there.
I think that is the... if you want to use another analogy for this poem, that's the big hill in the roller coaster.
Okay.
Without that, the rest of the hills don't happen.
Yes, I mean that's what really wakes you back up and puts you back into this piece. So.
Right.
Good choice. Picking the same lines again.
Yeah.
Well done, us. What would you like to start with here?
So
Richard Cory?
I'd like to start with a story from my education.
Okay.
But I'm going to get back very quickly to those three bad things, I think, from mine. I had possibly my favorite professor of all time was a psychology professor at the community college level. And we were talking about things like depression.
Okay.
And this guy was super funny. And he always had a smile on his face.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys that you woke up and you wanted to go to his class.
Okay.
And we were talking about depression. And we go in and we sit in the class, and he teaches the course on depression. And he talks about, it's when they put you on suicide watch is when you start acting like everything's fine.
Okay.
That's when they do it in a clinical setting, right? Like, suicide watch used to be a thing, like, in communities. Like, Lincoln was put on suicide watch by his town a couple times because he got so down.
All right.
But clinically,
yes.
It's not when you're down. It's when you start walking around like, everything's all right.
Everything's great.
Yeah, you're depressive, and that might be why you are in a clinical setting, but it's when everything is all right.
Okay.
And that's sort of what we get in this poem, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the lecture, this great guy who's always funny and always on time stands up and says, guys, I want to share this with you. And he delivers this poem from memory, from his school days.
Okay.
And I was impressed, right? Like, it's not often a professor shares with you a poem from memory.
Especially not like a literature professor.
Right.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? It's pretty impressive, right? And then you start thinking, wait a minute. This guy knows everything. And this guy's always funny. And this guy's always on time, right?
Yeah.
So
makes you think.
Without being a literature person, that literature moment doesn't stand out.
Okay.
But it did. So then I put him on suicide watch. But my three bad things, I'd like to read back over those again. Past the core conceit, there's not a ton of complexity here. And that's something that you agreed with, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You're only going to remember this poem for one reason. That was not one of yours, but you agree with that, right?
I will agree with that.
And the cutesy language, right?
Yes.
Not real...
Feels
not
forced.
real meaty. It's very forced, right?
Okay.
Rope-a-dope indeed.
Okay.
Those were my three bad things. A lot of times when I write these reviews, I go through them in order. I'll read the poem a couple times, and then I'll start on my review. A lot of times I will mark the line that I think, this is the best line.
Okay.
This time, second time, I'll see if it's the same line that sticks out to me. But after that, I go through the three good things.
Okay.
I go through the three bad things. The best line may or may not already be marked. Then I go through literary analysis. Once I've digested the whole poem, I have a rating for it.
Okay.
And I know what to recommend. So, this review was written in that fashion. When I wrote those three bad things, that's how I felt about them. But when I was going through and writing my three bad things, and I said, I don't like the cutesy language. Gentleman from soul to crown. I started thinking about it.
Okay.
Gentleman from soul to crown. It's so cutesy. It just sort of sticks in your teeth like you bit down on a Jolly Rancher. Now you got something super sweet and pokey in your mouth,
All right.
started turning it in my mind. Sole, S-O-L-E, is the bottom of the foot. That's what that's talking about, right?
Yes.
From the bottom of your foot to the top of your head.
Yes.
Just the gentleman.
Okay.
What else does soul mean? S-O-L-E.
S-O-L-E? Mm-hmm. Go on.
Means only.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, soul, the sole survivor in any situation.
And I think you were getting around to the other thing that soul means, phonetically. What is a soul phonetically?
That internal aura, whatever you want to call it.
Spirit.
Spirit.
Your soul, S-O-U-L. Phonetically, it's the same word. Mm-hmm. And that's strange, isn't it?
It is.
And when we're thinking about that phrase, soul to crown, why stop there? Especially when the phrase itself, soul to crown, stops suspiciously short, does it not?
Okay.
Crown of what?
Oh, I would say it's the crown as the top of the head, but
crown of your skull,
yes.
Right? But it doesn't say that. It says from soul to crown. We put crown of the skull in there. We imbue that reading with a biological interpretation. Automatically, we do that. But if we're listening to it, soul to crown might be something very different. We get the phrase soul, S-O-U-L, to crown. Who might have worn a crown? A king.
Okay.
But if you're talking about a king, you don't invoke their soul. What type of king might we talk about their soul?
We going towards a religious king
Yeah,
here?
A little bit, huh?
Okay.
It sounds like that, doesn't it? Soul to crown. Soul to crown sounds very religious.
Okay. If you want to go for like a Christian interpretation to this for soul to crown, it would be kind of odd that they're invoking the image of feet with the word soul as well, especially if you would be talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus washed his apostles' feet. So we've got a lot of things going on there, a lot of depth in that one little place. But there are a lot of other lines that read very funny here.
Okay.
That feel funny. Did any feel funny to you?
What do you... no, not off,
Nothing
just,
felt...
nothing quick.
Why didn't anything feel funny to you?
Because it was very simple and it flowed quite well.
That tempo.
Yes.
And that rhythm. How does this sound to you? If you were to close your eyes and just hear it... Oh, now I'm having trouble finding it. Give me just 1 second here. I've got it in my notes, but quietly arrayed. How does that sound?
Quietly arrayed?
Yeah. If something
Seems a little strange.
If something is arrayed, what is it?
It does seem strange to fit in
Set
there.
out sort of in a circular or half circular pattern. Maybe like a crown. Maybe like a halo.
Okay.
What about this line? He was human when he talked.
That's an interesting thing to say. I mean, you could say someone is very humanistic, have humanistic qualities, but it is weird to say he was very human.
It's very strange to say he was human when he talked, especially if you're following that up with he glittered when he walked. Now, these are all things that might be said of a rich guy, right?
Okay.
You know, he was so down to earth. He was
down to earth.
He was real rich, but golly, you know, he really wanted to know how my day went.
Okay.
And I think we've all known someone like that who was super successful, but, you know, he was just one of the guys.
Okay.
You know, really made you feel at home when you talked to him. Then we get on, richer than a king. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, right? Why? Why do we render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's when you're the Son of God? Because what you have is worth so much more than that, right?
Okay.
You don't have this estate. Your estate is all. So that sounds like one of those things that could be said about somebody. You just say that about, God, he was richer than God, you know?
Yeah.
He was richer than the king. Had more money than the king. More money
Simple,
than the president.
colloquial English, but used for a different reason here.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about schooled in every grace?
It's interesting we use the word grace again.
What might grace mean?
Grace can mean a lot of things. Schooled in every grace could mean that he's schooled in many practices, things like that.
But do we
grace
really have
is
any reason
also,
to see that?
No. Okay.
Now I want you to look at the first line of the last stanza and read that out loud.
So on we worked and waited for the light. Waiting for morning.
Sure.
Or a different kind of light, perhaps.
He grace us with his presence, shining individual.
If you want to go further and went without meat and curse the bread, curse the bread is a very weird little phrase in there. Okay, I'm
weird
getting on
little
board.
phrase there. Do you know what Richard means?
Richard is, isn't that a name for king, nobility, strength, power?
Sure. Rick in Old English means ruler, and hard means brave. So ruler, a hard ruler, very brave ruler.
Yes.
Do you know what Cory means?
No.
In the Old English... Now, Cory, you see that a lot as a first name, don't you?
You do. Not often as a last name.
Not often. It exists.
I'm sure.
Just like the phrase, glittered when he walked and richer than a king. Those things exist.
Okay.
But they're odd to hear, especially when you put them all together. Cory means chosen.
Okay.
So is there a delineation? So under that reading, we are seeing the chosen one, the chosen ruler, commit suicide.
Okay.
What is, I think this opens up the discussion, what is the difference between martyrdom and just straight suicide?
Well, I believe you would have to argue that martyrdom is more for a cause, for a greater justice, a greater good. But
if you are martyring yourself, is it not a suicidal act?
It is a suicidal act, absolutely.
So basically, public opinion?
And if you, again, want to get into it, maybe I'm just jumping ahead to your argument, to kill yourself. He's definitely got people talking. He's definitely got people thinking.
And he is definitely on a plane above these other people, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So if these other people who are toiling, who are going without meat and cursing the bread, and they're working so hard, and this guy who has everything is still in this place where he doesn't want any of it, and he ends his own life, would that not communicate to them? That's not the life we necessarily want. He doesn't have everything. He didn't have happiness. Is it, in this, an act of martyrdom?
There's a good possibility of that there. Now, I would say this is very much a baseline poem, grass isn't always greener. Simple as that. But if he is martyring himself for that greater good, to create that better ideal...
Does the intent have to be there for martyrdom?
The intent doesn't have to be there, not necessarily. It's what the collection put towards it.
Right.
So he did off himself, absolutely, but why did he off himself? If we all come to agreement he did it for this reason, this inspires us, this changes us, then that's when we start to label martyrdom.
Does he have to do it for that reason in order to inspire the same change of opinion?
I would say yes.
I would say no.
Okay.
If this is a man who is suffering so greatly that he doesn't want to do it again, he doesn't want to do it tomorrow, so we're not going to do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Right? I don't think he would ever stop and think to himself, we'll call the speaker here Ed.
Okay.
Ed down in the town who doesn't have the money.
He's not thinking about Ed.
He's not thinking about Ed.
He's thinking about himself. So you would say that martyrdom is what people interpret the act for.
Is martyrdom in the title? Or might martyrdom come from the situation itself?
Okay.
Right? So this is someone who has suffered, and this is someone whose choice definitely impacted our speaker.
True. Very true.
We have every reason to believe, if this is a speaker of a poem, that individual has changed the speaker's life. Again, we're fictionalizing that, right?
Yes.
Because
that's part of interpretation, though. Is what you're taking from this.
We're absolutely putting that into the poem. But you have to read a change into the speaker here.
Okay.
So is the intent necessary for martyrdom
Possibly not.
to be the outcome?
Possibly not.
So what is it that defines martyrdom?
That's a difficult question again. I think it's not your personal intentions, the martyr's intentions. It's more so what the collection around the martyr take from that intent.
Right. So
what old Ed's feeling about this, how this changed Ed.
Right. So when we're speaking about Christ, for example,
Okay.
the Christ story was not suicide.
No, it was done with intent and purpose.
But it was suicide by cop, was it not?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
The Jesus character had the powers of God. If he wanted to evade the Roman guard, you cannot convince me that that character existing in all that character's power and glory
He could have.
could not have done so.
Okay.
So,
It was his choice.
right,
And that's what makes the story wonderful. And he chose to do this.
right.
Okay.
So what we've got here, is this an act of martyrdom?
From Richard Cory's standpoint, I would say no.
Through intent, no.
Through intent, no.
Through
But
observation?
through observation, yes, perhaps. Interesting. And I do think it's interesting you talked a little bit about the name itself, Richard Cory. Do you know a little bit about E.A. Robinson?
No.
Read up a little bit about him. This would be a man who I would imagine would wholeheartedly choose this name with care, as every author should, but a little bit more. When Edwin Robinson was born, he was never named.
Really?
Yes, he lived 6 months of his life because his parents wanted a girl, and they didn't want to acknowledge him, so they didn't name him. And they finally just picked one randomly out of a book, opened a page, and be like, all right, his name's Edwin now, so we're going to deal with this.
Wow.
Man who never married. Man who lived alone. Man who won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Like anymore all the time.
Multiple Pulitzer Prizes.
Really? This is the only thing I've ever heard of by him.
Very successful, very lonely man. So, not to take away from your wonderful religious interpretation here, but is E.A. Robinson Richard Cory? Because this is a man who has everything, who is very sociable, who's been able to express himself, successful.
Martyred himself to literature?
Very alone. Gets lonely at the top, man. So, I think you have to take in a little biographical information about this to appreciate this poem, because it does seem like the writer is placing himself into this. And very interesting, because, like I said, lived a very difficult life.
Yeah.
And just circumstantially made a life better for himself. But you get that hint, I was never wanted. That sticks with you.
Sure. And I think that, so, should we get into a little bit of discussion about, is biography necessary to literary interpretation? Because we get this a lot on the channel.
We do. Some people say it's very interesting to take a look at this. Some people say, well, why the hell didn't you read about this? Because then you know more about it. No, it's not necessary. It's not. But
what
when
is
you're
in the text is in the text.
correct, the text should always stand alone.
I believe that is known as new criticism.
Okay.
I believe that's where now I could be wrong.
It's been a while since I brushed up on that.
Right.
However, sometimes it is extremely beneficial if you're wanting to look at the text in a different way.
Sure, absolutely. And I would never tell someone that it is not helpful to do so, but I would say that it is not absolutely necessary. Right? What's in the text is in the text.
Yeah.
I can take away anything that I want or need from the text from the text.
Okay. So I tried to identify with myself what makes this poem good to me, besides, it's a very memorable poem. It honestly is.
Melancholy.
It is. This is almost a very early Bukowski feel, too. This is the lonely man that Bukowski fames himself for writing about.
Okay.
And maybe that's what I love Bukowski now. Maybe this was just an early draw towards that for me. But you do get that sense of loneliness. There's a lot of emotional appeal in this. And once you start looking into the author's life, like you would usually do with Bukowski, that sense of loneliness is just all the more prominent.
Okay. Yeah.
So very interesting read this time around. This is the first time I read anything about the author.
And am I interrupting you?
Yeah, you're good.
That's another thing that is precariously placed in this poem. When he's speaking about Richard Cory, it is a lone individual, soul, S-O-L-E. But he always uses we.
Oh, the people of the town, we, yeah. So
the speaker is speaking as a we.
Speaking for the community,
yeah.
General consensus.
One of the people.
Okay.
We all know each other. And when this guy came to town, we all loved him.
Okay.
But then he
nobody
always
knew
retreated.
Him.
He always went back.
All right. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff here with this. I didn't expect to go this long with this poem because, like I said, it's very cut and dry to me. which I think is what a lot of people get to. So hopefully we open a...
But did that add to your reading?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
I think it sheds some new light on some things here.
It makes you think about something different.
It does, and that's always a good thing. What would you rate Richard Cory?
I would give this 84 Imperially Slims out of 100.
Okay. I maybe highballed it a little bit because I've always loved this. I gave it 88 Calm Summer Nights. So relatively close here.
What would you recommend?
This is a text that I love. It's a collection of poems. I've recommended it many times before, but just scathingly the same. Spoon River Anthology, Edgar Lee Masters. It's a collection of epitaph poems. People who lived in this town called Spoon River. It's wonderful. Very Richard Cory feel about it. I've argued to make you read it for years, but we'll get there one day. One day.
I would say I Felt a Funeral in My Brain by Emily Dickinson. I think if you're looking for the macabre with... you're looking for the macabre, that's Emily Dickinson.
Okay.
You're looking for a little bit of weird, you're looking for Emily Dickinson. So I think that this poem and that poem would complement each other very well with side-by-side read-throughs.
Okay. Two very similar poems in that aspect.
Yeah.
All right. If you like this kind of thing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and give this video a like as well. We always appreciate it, and the likes help us get through our day, especially when we're reading Richard Cory. Makes us feel good about ourselves.
And we're being yelled at in the comment section about why didn't you read this, why didn't you know this about the author, etc., etc.
We're going to get there one of these days. Make sure you leave a comment down below as well. Speaking of comment, yelling at us for not reading some other text that we should have read. We always appreciate reading those as well.
And I'm sure someone will yell at me for not knowing anything else by Edwin Arlington Robinson.